Hello and welcome to week 3 of SIL 201, Intermediate Silhouette Effects. My name's Ben Brownlee and I'm glad you're still with me. So this week we're going to be taking a look, as you can probably tell, at wire removal. And this subject here is actually a little bit trickier than you might think for a couple of different reasons. I mean, one of the biggest ones is actually just the fact that we've got a whole load of fur going on, and we've got several different layers of fur. So for example, the head, the neck, all of these move in slightly different ways. So we're going to find that some of the approaches that we're going to take aren't going to be suitable for, the entire shot. So we're going to have to come in with a bit more of a blended technique or blended approach to getting this shot looking good. So let's get onto the first bit, which is going to be the wire roto shape. So let's come in and create a new layer wire. And as ever, the basis of our good roto is going to be good tracking. And in this shot, probably more than ever. So let's come in and we're just going to do a single point track for this to speed things along. Because we shouldn't really need any more. Let's pick the red channel there. Behavior of the start frame. Blur it up just a tiny amount because there is a bit of noise in the footage, and come in with a denoise as well. Contrast isn't going to help us too much because it's just going to start to quickly destroy a lot of the fun pattern. But I'll add a couple of points up there, and let's just track this through. It's looking okay. Yeah, that's looking fine. So come in, apply that. Rename my tracker. Wire center track and bring that down to the bottom. Cool. Alright, so let's get our wire here, come back into the transform. Just reposition our anchor point over the top there. So if we look through, we've got a couple of different shapes that we've got to do. Luckily, actually, the wire itself is pretty rigid. So the shape here is going to be the same throughout the entire range. So that's cool. I'm not worried about that. And if we come back into this area here, we've got this wire here, or this part of the wire. It's bending a little bit, as is this one. So it's probably going to be 3 shapes. And let's come in and just bring this in here. Now I'm not going to concern myself with being hyper accurate when it comes to the white area over here. Because what we're going to do with this later is probably expand this out anyway, and feather it out a bit more. So I can come in and just be slightly looser than we have been previously. So let's add a little bit there. Cool. And let's rename this as main wire. Let's just track this one through, or animate this one through. Shouldn't be any big problems with this one at all. So we're going to do a lot of what we did last time. Use the rotation in the transform. And again, just look for those little sections where we're animating in and out. We can always just add a key. We don't want to move the shape. Because there's quite a bit of that with this one. It's sort of a bit of stop-start. And the shape itself has gone out a little bit here. I think that's something to do with the tension over on this side over here. So I can't really come in and transform this out with the rotation anymore. So I hit W. I can just distort this again, holding down the Alt key. Actually, maybe I'll come into the reshape tool and just give myself a bit more leverage there. We are probably going to expand this out a little bit extra later on, so it's not too much of a hassle. T to come back to transform, W back to rotate. And actually probably easiest just to come in and do a transform just on those end points there. Cool, it's a bit fast and loose up at the top here, but that's not going to be a problem. We're mainly interested down here, and we're going to expand out our results anyway, as I said, so that's all cool. Over here we're going to have to be a bit more observant. So I'll lock my main wire up now, and let's just quickly create the other shapes. Now, as I'm having to start to manipulate some of the points over here, it's actually getting quite tricky to see where those points are, because in the prefs here, we go to the shape. Actually, my selected point color is black at the moment, so it's really tricky to see what's going on. So let's just hit apply. That's going to be a lot easier there. So it's going to make it a bit easier to sort all this out. Now, for this top wire, things start to... well, it starts to look as if actually keyframing shapes isn't going to be helping me, at least for the first bit. It's going to be a bit more about keyframing, because we've got that little joint there, so it's going to be a bit more about keyframing using the reshape. So we'll see what we can get done with this, of course, but it's probably going to be a bit more reshaping than before. So select these keys here, hit T twice, and then I can just transform those up. Because these two control points at the bottom here, these are locked in. It's just this extra joint here where things are going to start to be a bit more interesting. So it's nice that we get to be able to control things on not only an object level, but also a sub-object level as well. So let's just check that through. That looks all right. Going to copy and paste that keyframe in there. So I didn't need to animate that out until the end. Cool. All right, so now we should have, let's take this back to about 30%. And turn off the overlay. So now we should have our little wire. Cool. So this is actually going to be invaluable when we start piecing everything together in compositing stage. So now we're at this stage, let's render this out. So let's come up to actions, render active node. I'll take this out as a PNG sequence. Actually, I just want alpha only in this case. And I've got this going to my mats out folder, and we will call this wire main. And let's just render that. So now we've got that for later. Okay, let's turn off my wire now, and let's take a look at something else. So the basic idea for some of this now is once we get to the compositing stage, is that we start to basically cut out. Let's actually show what I mean by turning this back on and setting this to composite. setting this to inverse here. So basically what I'm going to do in the compositing stage now is have a clean plate of our fur coming on here, floated behind this cutout section here, motion tracked in, and that should be enough to remove our wire. Now the problem that I'm facing is that we've got several different layers of fur. I mean, they're not all coming in the same plane. We've got, let's turn our wire back off again for a second, take this back to output. We've got our head here with the neck line here, so all this fur here that's covering this side of our wire, and probably actually this side here is also of a different plane as well. Actually, now I come to think of it, so these two are in separate planes, and then we have our shoulder here, which is all of this area here, also coming through in a separate motion, in a separate plane. So if we just had one clean plate floated behind here, it's not going to look realistic at all. It's actually going to look fairly terrible, just because we're not going to get that sort of natural motion coming in. So what I also want to do is I want to come in and maybe just separate out some of these different planes. So let's come in and start to do that. Now we could, probably base a lot of the stuff off of our main track that we've already got. So the shape we want actually isn't too tricky to create just from the center track. So yeah, let's just do that. So we'll come into our new layer again. I will call this one shoulder. There's only one shoulder that we're interested in, so I'm just actually going to keep this called shoulder. Select my track here, come over back into the tracking, apply that straight away, and let's now create our shape. So I'm going to again take this fairly wide, turn my overlays on, take this fairly wide, and I want to have it so it's just over that shoulder section there. There's no reason to actually come in and actually make this absolutely perfect, because all we're interested in is that lovely intersection that's going to come between these two objects. So if I hit my overlay back on, turn my wire back on here, let's come in and start intersecting these up. So in the same way that shapes have their blend modes that let those interact together, the layers themselves also have blend modes which let them interact together as well. So if I've got intersect turned on my shoulder, so long as that's above the wire, we're going to get a nice little intersection going on there that's only going to have that shoulder wire section. So that's cool. And let's render that one out now. Call this wire shoulder. Cool, and let's actually bring this into After Effects and see how far we are with the shot. So in After Effects I've got my shot set up here, and let's just import our mats in. The wire main, and it's a bit quick there, also the wire shoulder. Let's just look at the shoulder first, so let's bring that over and above and set that to Luma inverted. Just check everything's working out alright, and it is, it's fine. Cool. So we'll duplicate up our chimp, set that at the bottom. Turn the track mat off on that, and we are going to call this one clean plate shoulder. We're going to call this chimp shoulder. And wire shoulder, just so we can keep a good track of what's going on here. So when creating my clean plate, there's a couple of different things that we can do with this. We can come in and we can paint this up. Use a clone brush and sort of heal this all out of the way. But one of the ways that I like to do things as well is actually to come in and just slip this in time and see if there's at any point we can find a good section where we can just sort of have this slipped out and have the wire itself being revealed to us without, you know, changing any of the pixels at all. So let's set this above, turn this to difference mode, turn my track matte off for the moment being, and let's just slip this out. So what I'm looking for here is probably the point where the wire's most out of the way. I'm going to have to come in now and match the fur back up. Now, I'm probably not going to get an absolute perfect match here, but if we can get some of the way there, then I'm going to be a bit happier. Cool, so that's probably getting there a bit. Let's freeze this frame. So let's finish cleaning up this on the shoulder here. Double click on that, come to our clone tool, just alt click, take my opacity down to about 26%, so I actually have to go over this a few times. Of course, back in the main comp, we're starting to get that right. Now in Silhouette Effects, we obviously do have an option of blurring out our effect or our shape if we want to, but I know that there's a lot of compositors out there who, you know, want you to deliver just hard edge shapes so that they can then come in and do the blurring up themselves. And that's just what we can do here. So I have just a regular Gaussian blur on that. Starting to get some of the wire back in there. So let's come into our channel, come to Minimax, bump that up. Set the maximum to about 3. You usually find actually a good rule of thumb is you blur twice as much as your Minimax is set to. So that's just expanded that out a little bit and giving it a bit of softness, so that's cool. Alright, so that's starting to look like something. We actually now need to have this all tracked into place, because otherwise, obviously it's not going anywhere. And I want a couple of different trackers. I want a tracker up here and a tracker down here. So let's create my null object up here, call this tracker shoulder. Cool. And let's just track our main shoulder over there. And add rotation in as well. Let's just track that through. Okay, that's looking pretty solid. So let's apply that now. Come back here. Parent our clean plate shoulder to the tracked in shoulder there. Right, so that's not looking fantastic, and I reckon it is our tracking that's to blame. So I'm going to go back and retrack those and let's see what we can do. Okay, so with the new tracking now, everything's starting to look a little bit better. I mean, the edge of the corner, so the edge of the shoulder here, just zoom into that. The edge of the shoulder here is looking fairly nice. What we do have here, though, is a very obvious patch just floating in here, which just, you know, isn't going to work at all. So whereas for the edge here, where the fur needs to be fairly static, that's all cool that doesn't move. But in the inner shoulder here, that's just giving the game away far too much. So let's come in and fix that a little bit. Cool, so I'm just going to come now down and duplicate up my shoulder and the wire thing here. Keep those at the top. And let's just come into the bottom one here. So what I want to do now is just eat in away at this mat a little bit. So we're kind of coming in and just going into the center area a bit more. And probably do min then max. 10's going to be a bit much. 6, and we can probably take in a little bit of that there, of the Gaussian blur. That should be okay. Cool. So what I want to do, so let's invert this, or actually not invert this, but let's take the tracking mat to Luma again. So this is going to show in my original back through here. So probably 6 is going to be a bit high as well. Let's take that in. Cool. So what I want to do now is just instead of using a still patch, just slip this out of the way, and hopefully if the fur's the same sort of colour, this should be absolutely fine. So let's come in and let's just go with the position. Maybe just rotate that a couple of degrees. Snip that over a little bit. Okay, interesting. The problem we've got, of course, again, new problem, is that this is moving in and out, and seems to be coming in over where we want it to go to, so easily fixed with just a quick mask in After Effects. This is something where we could actually have taken out, or probably would actually take out a series of masks from Silhouette, but we're here now. We're starting to get somewhere. So we've got a bit more life coming back into the fur here. Right, let's pop back into Silhouette because I want to do something else with some of the rest of the wire here. Now there's certain pieces of the wire. Let's actually take that off so we can't see anything here. Yes, so a certain piece of the wire here that's probably, instead of coming in and trying to patch this all up, probably just going to be easier to paint this out. Now I would try to limit the amount of paint that I would do on any sort of complex area like this for doing wire removal as much as I possibly can. Because any sort of difference that we're going to start to see here is going to be really, really visible. So any sort of patterns or any sort of small errors that we make are going to be really, really visible. But there's some really nice tools in Silhouette Effects that are going to make this a lot easier. And again, those tracking points are going to be absolutely invaluable. So I'm going to take the same points that I got in After Effects. Let's come in and call this paint track, and come back into our tracker here and create another couple of trackers. So we've got one down here, one up here. Sharpen this all the way up. If I select multiple trackers, we can track these simultaneously. So let's come in and just see what we get. Cool, that looks pretty good. So let's come in now and just apply that with position, scaling and rotation to our paint track. Hit OK on that, and after I check out what this is doing. Make sure it is nice and stable. That's cool, that's going to be workable. So we've got one for the shoulder over there. So I can delete these. And let's come in and we're going to do paint track neck. So we'll call the first one we had paint track left. We'll do another tracker, and we'll bring this down here for the fur. So I just want to find any part of the fur that I can possibly track. It's not going to be easy on this one. That seems to be all right. Seems like there was a little jump at some point. Any jump we get is going to really, and any jump we get is actually going to cause us a load of hassle. I need another one down here as well, because we're going to need rotation on this one too. So let's start painting. Now, if you haven't got a paint node set up when you start your session, you can always come into edit session and just add whichever node you want to come in. I've already got my paint in there, so come in here, find the right folder for my paint. Now Silhouette FX has a raster paint system in it, so there aren't vector brushes or anything. There's no timeline to worry about for persistence of brush shapes. Basically each frame is a frame on its own. So if we take a quick look, I've got my regular brush turned on at the moment. So if I want to make a paint stroke, let's come in, make softness of 0. I want to make a paint stroke. It's done there, and now I can just use the Z-Nex I would normally use to step through the frames and just paint in frame by frame. Literally painting frame by frame like that. There's no timeline for my paint strokes. The only thing that the timeline tells us here is whether I painted on the frame or not. So you can see here, only has a keyframe when I've got a paint on or not. And the useful thing is that at any point, let's make something weird here. At any point I can come in and restore either the current frame that I'm working on if I've made a big mistake on a particular frame, or I can just ditch all of the frames or just the work range that we're working on at any given point. But the fun stuff actually starts happening when we come into the clone here. So let's come to my first frame again. And come in here a bit more. So with the clone we've got our 10 brushes down here which we can customize in a number of different ways. Let's start off with our first brush here. So if our source is set to output, it's going to start to build up brushes based on the result of what the current frame looks like. If it's set to foreground, it's going to be based on the frame before we started doing any other work on it. We can also come in and bring in clean plates, but for now I'm going to just stick with foreground. There's basically a couple of different of ways of cloning. We can either clone spatially or temporally, or spatially and temporally. So really what that means is we can either come in, I'll set my first clone source up, turn my interactive on. I can either come in and just slip our clone source out the way. So pretty much what we did in After Effects, where I just shifted the layer out of the way, came in, rotated around a little bit. Cool. And the little interactive thing here means that we can just come in and have this a sort of standard GUI widget thing here. And then we can just sort of come in and see what the result's going to be down the bottom here with our interactive buttons. So let's come in, set this, brush up. Keep this 100% opacity, take our softness all the way up. I can just brush that out of the way. Now I can already see that that's smearing out and not looking very nice. So if I don't like it, just undo it, come back, do it again. Let's take my softness down a little bit here. We're dealing with noisy footage. The softness could be a killer for us here. So I can just come in, step through, and just slice that up a little bit. Now already I'm seeing, as I just step through this play up to swing, and already we can see that after the first few frames why we start to really kind of use paint as our sort of weapon of last choice, because it can be very difficult not to end up with these big splotchy patches that start to draw attention to themselves. If the shape sort of starts to change and you know, starts to wiggle about all over the place, it's just going to draw attention to itself and not look great. So let's just restore all of our frames here. Come right back to where we were. So one of the important things to avoid that sort of chattering going on is consistency, and we can do that with a clean plate. So let's come in, import our media, import our clean plate. There we go. Cool, and come into our inputs and now set this up as our clean. Remember, of course, we again, let's extend out the duration so that it's more than one frame long, and come back into our paint here. So here we can now come to our clone source 1. Actually, let's come to a brush that we haven't touched, brush 4, come to our clone source 1, and opacity is fine, that's all fine. We can just come in and paint the area out here. So we'll take a look at our clone 1 here. It's very, very quick. Bit of cloning just to create that first clean plate. Let's just take out only really want the areas around the fur here, because anything else we take out is going to start looking a little bit inconsistent. We can try and take out this area here and this area here and see how we get on with that. And that's all well and good for one frame, but if you want to repeat that again and again, you know, we'd have to come in and start to clone this out again and again, and that's cool, up to the point where we realize that actually all of this is moving here and our clean plate isn't. So we've got this static mess created here. So let's let's restore everything again and redo that one. So what I want to do is have a way, actually using that track that we did on the neck with scale and rotation, to kind of come in and manipulate our clean plate. And we can do that directly with our track in here. If we come down here, we can then choose which one we want. I want my paint track neck in this case here. And if I move through, actually let's take this to full screen here. Yeah, as I move through, you can see that now my clean plate is moving along with the background footage, and hopefully if our tracking is good enough, then that is going to work out absolutely fine. Bit concerning that we're getting such a big shrink out there, but we'll that could be because it's turning around quite significantly. Well, let's see how we get on. So you can actually see as we move through the frames that the offset on our brush is getting bigger and bigger, because it's showing us where it's sampling. Starting to scream out a little bit over this side, so I'm going to hang off on that side a little bit more. Just come in here, just really take the neck fur along here. Cool, and that's starting to work out alright. Going to be a bit careful that we're not going to get just really patchy along here. The only thing that I'm worried about is things are going a little bit sort of static over on this side. But the cool thing is at the compositing level we can always come in and just sort of take some of that out and blend it back in a bit more naturally. Because remember, we've got all of this here, all of the wires here out as a separate shape that we can basically do whatever we want to do with it. Cool, and apart from a little bit of static there, things are starting to look up for us. So we've got that little area sorted out now. So let's export this out and see how it plays into the main composition. So we'll render out our active node here, and let's come over and we'll save. We can now actually save out the paint only with an external alpha or an internal alpha if our file format supports it. If we're exporting out something like JPEG that doesn't support an internal alpha channel, then that's when we can just save out an external. But let's take this out to a PNG, and we will call this paint neck. Take this out to our painted. And in After Effects, let's bring this in and see what we're looking at. So let's bring this over the top. It's taking out some of our nice stuff. So actually, let's find where the right place for this is going to be. So it's probably underneath. Of course, let's take a little look there. Yeah, probably what I'm seeing actually is I need to feed in the other wire now, the full sort of main wire, so just the wire shoulder, and that should start to give me the result that I want. Cool, we're getting there. So the thing we have to finish off now is just to fill in the last few remaining gaps, because we don't want that cling plate, which is really only meant to be for this area over here, sort of taking over the rest of the view. So let's come in and see what we can do with just an overall slip. So let's do another duplicate copy of our shoulder, bring that underneath the paint, take the track mat off on that one, and take my mask off on that as well. And see what we've got with just that position and rotate that we did before. So probably one of the final remaining problems we've got now is actually to do with our paint layer. So what I've done is I've just gone through and minimized the paintwork that I've done now. So instead of having large areas going along here, which I was going to choke back, instead what I've got is just taking out that original first little area just down there. So this part just down here. Cool, and let's come back and render this out. And we'll take this out to TIFF. You know, it really actually doesn't make a difference whether it's TIFF or PNG, just file size really. And let's call this paint neck. Call this paint neck 2 and render that out. Now back in After Effects, let's bring in paint neck 2. And we'll take this and put this back in the same place we had it before. So just above the clean plate. Render that out. And that's looking a lot nicer. We've got, you know, less stuff to work with, so it's looking better just on that paint area. Cool. I'm not happy about this part here. I think this is where we're being let down a little bit, which is our clean plate here, which I appear to have broken by bringing that in there. Yep, so let's come in and set that to Luma again. So things are starting to get a little bit confusing down here. So let's come up and actually break this down from the top down to the bottom. So we've got our tracker coming in here, which is doing the stabilize for the clean plate down the bottom. That's just our frozen quick clean plate that we made. So let's have a look. So we've got the original shoulder to here, which is now cutting out the entire wire. So we've got our chimp shoulder now just filling in that little area there. We have our paintwork coming in and filling in this area down here now. And we have our clean plate shoulder, which is coming in, fading through there. So that's filling in basically everything else. And I probably don't want that filling in everything else because that's taking over and making this area nice and soft. So let's just make another little thing there. And there we go. That's better. Cool, so that's just filling in that small shape just down there. Cool, so actually that clean plate shoulder, I don't want to have any luminance on that at all. All I want to do is have that one around over there. There we go. Cool. So somehow I lost that matte that I had on there before. I don't need that one there. That's just confusing everything. And now this bottom one, this chimp shoulder here, is just filling in the last little area here. Cool. Now I'm not happy with how that's looking for a start, so let's just slip that out a little bit and just scale that up. Cool. Now the only thing I'm missing actually is this little area here. Let's play this through. And that's now looking pretty nice. Yeah. So the only thing that's missing is adding this area here, and maybe the wire is coming in somewhere, probably because of one of these. And I think it's probably going to be our paint layer here. Yep, it is. So let's just come in and mask that off. Just give it a really quick invert that. Actually, further it out just a little bit. See if we can get away with that animating it. Probably should animate it. but I'm not going to. So the last little bit is probably just getting rid of the final bits of wire that's poking through here, and I think, come up here, I think it's because the Gaussian blur's up too high. So if I take that down, about 8, yeah, that's got rid of the big bit. There's one small bit there, which is going to be in the clean plate shoulder there. So let's come in. Yeah, it's probably this little bit here. Let's come and just paint that up. Let's have a look. Ah, yeah. Let's really paint that up a whole load there. So now if we come into our composition, that should all be gone. Of course, let's take a little look at the final. So let's take another look there. Yeah, there's a couple of little bits and bobs that if I was going to polish this up, I'd probably want to change. There's something a little bit on the shoulder there, and that's going to be a simple case of maybe adding another little separated out patch, just going on as we've done before. But other than that, I think we've now gotten rid of that wire quite nicely. So just breaking down what we did in the end, we came and we started off with our wire track. We made up our wire frame in general here. We then exported that out. We created a separate spline for the shoulder just to bring that little area going in there. We made another couple of tracks, and one for the fur area here and another one for the neck area down here, which meant that when we came into the paint, we were able to use the tracking down here to actually track in our clean plate, which we'd set up here. So by doing that, we didn't have to come in and chase our tails and sort of, keep repositioning things to create clones. All we then had to do was clone the wire out in a subtle and rather restrained fashion. So in this situation, only really using paint as a sort of backup plan for when the other techniques haven't worked out. And we're seeing the reasons why. It's very difficult, even given perfect circumstances, to get paint, especially RGB paint strokes on a complicated amount of fur like this, not sort of looking weird and starting to strobe between frames. So we got rid of that weirdness by sort of trying to work with our clean plate instead, and being very aware of those problems that we had. And obviously things started getting a little bit trickier when we started to add everything together in After Effects. But the basic idea was we took our original footage, poked a hole in it, and then started to fill in that hole with different areas. So we brought in our clean plate shoulder for the side here. We brought in our background to fill in the rest of the stuff, and then added in details, including the paint and just this living bit of fur there. So we try to avoid those sort of static patches wherever possible, and use moving video files instead. That seems to give a much better result, whilst keeping the lovely fur edge over on the left hand side. Now, as always, I'm going to be in the forums this week, so if you do have specific questions, then just let me know and we'll go through them. But for now, thanks again, and I will see you next time.